Hey, Lisa, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Hi, Brian. It's a privilege to be here. I was very excited to be asked to participate on your show. I love your LinkedIn feeds and enjoy it. It's the very best part of going through LinkedIn for me. So I love that, Brian. My background is a little bit unique with regard to how I came to be in many sales adjacent roles. So I started out my career as an IT practitioner across all parts of technology up to and including a chief innovation officer role, which was a classic CIO role combined with a chief marketing role. And from that, I went into an enterprise territory management role for Microsoft and managed the GO for Microsoft. So that was a little bit of a change for me. And I made that change because I felt like I needed to understand what it was like to really be responsible for driving revenue. And that was a great opportunity for me. And then most recently, I managed half of the United States for Gartner Executive Programs, which is an offering that's focused on creating one-on-one relationships between executive coaches and executives usually in the technology space. So think 700-ish prior executives, 700-ish executives, clients from every industry, including public sector.
Cool. And how'd you get into sales, though, or why?
I really wanted to understand what it was like to drive revenue. When you're on the IT side, you're so far removed from how the business is actually making money. And I felt like, quite frankly, that my career was going to top out and I was going to spend my entire career doing what I thought of as operations, which is a noble pursuit, but not necessarily a great fit for me. So, and then once I kind of dipped my toe in the sales area, it's a little bit like, you can't really pull yourself back. It's a fun place to be. And you're where you're creating value for not only your own business, but for the clients that you serve, which is really important to me.
And it's the closest you get to being an entrepreneur and
Yes,
understanding how business really works.
absolutely. And the really great salespeople take that kind of ownership. They take that kind of ownership of their territories, of their clients, and creating a successful business for themselves. And it's just a really fun, empowering place to be.
How about things like the pressure and the bluntness, because most departments, there's a fluffiness to it. I remember when I moved into sales, going from being highly valued to pretty much, what have you done for me lately?
That's absolutely true. Quite literally, you can close a giant deal in the next day. Well, that was yesterday, right?
That was yesterday's party.
Now what's your plan? So, the part that's been most appealing to me and what I've really been drawn to is executive facing sales. And having been a CIO myself, I really understand how high the risk is for executives on a daily basis. And I think when you're on the outside of that, they look like they're in control of their domain and they've got this all under, they've got it all under control and nobody's worried. And the reality is that there are very few people rooting for an executive to be successful.
Yeah, especially the CIO, because it's, bubble gum and paper clips, right? And you ask them what keeps them up at night is everything. Right.
So it's so true. So I always, I've been in what I call sales adjacent roles for years now, and I'm always counseling people to make sure that you really put yourself in their shoes. And Brian, I've even heard you talk about before how important it is to think outside in instead of inside out when you're approaching your sales prospects. And these people, let me give you an example. Fortune 50 organization, brand new executive, been brought in to create a net new organization, right? So when you ask yourself, who's really wanting him to be successful? I suspect the CEO and the board of directors wanting to be successful, but everyone that he comes in contact with, he's probably taking a little bit of their current turf.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have to understand the risk side of what he's managing through. A huge opportunity for somebody in that role, but when you're in a net new executive role, there are a lot of people coming after you. And if you're not successful, they're largely going to be happy because they get to continue doing what they've been doing.
And I think a lot of reps underestimate the political part of those things, the political impact that your product or project might have on people.
Exactly. And for that C-suite audience, the political impact is they're just battered every day, all day long. They've got people coming at them, some of them with a smile.
Yeah.
But they're still coming at them, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really important to think through, how do you become somebody that is a trusted partner for them? And that's somebody that's helping them, arm them with information. Imagine what it's like for these executives to try to stay current on every topic that they're expected to be the expert on. And if you can arm them with information and a talk track that says, here's the corporate objective we're trying to achieve, here's the plan that I have in place to get there, and here's how we're going to execute against that plan, and the ultimate loop back around to them meeting that corporate objective. If you help them to piece together that story, corporate objective down to your product and service, and back up to that business corporate objective impact, it's huge. They need that help. They need somebody in their corner.
That's it, because if you don't do it, they have to do it. And
Right.
if you're waiting for them to do it, good luck.
Yeah.
Right?
And how many products and services are coming at them, right? How many? I had an executive client yesterday share with me that he was averaging 400 sales touches every 2 days.
Yeah.
400. And he was talking specifically about email, and this is a large client, but he said, I don't read any of that. I don't touch any of that. I just push it away. I have my admin assistant deal with it. I filter all those messages out into other folders. I mean, he was just, I don't have time for any of that. So how do you break through that? How do you be the story? You got to create a talk track. You've got to build that whole mission, or that whole value cycle for him.
Yeah.
Give him the information.
And I think people can misinterpret that as that you have to be a domain expert.
Right.
You have to have value. You have to be able to talk to it, but you don't have to go and get a master's in computer science or, I mean, you got an MBA, but has that helped you a lot in sales and business, or is it?
Well, for me personally, it has, because I can work all the way through the financials for them.
Yeah.
And yes, that can be helpful, but it's not required. It's more about, if you don't know how your product or service is going to help that organization to win in their business, then shame on you.
Right. Then you're just a vendor. You're talking about who you are, what you do, and how much it costs. And they're like, okay, now you're a commodity. And if you look at any category, there's 50 vendors in every category today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And if you become commoditized, what happens when you get to the negotiation phase?
It's price. That's what a commodity is, right? A pound of sand is worth a certain amount of money. Your pound of sand is no different than my pound of sand.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I think that's where many salespeople are missing the boat. You've got to be able to articulate the business value that your product or service is creating. And if you want to target a C-suite buyer, you've got to be able to tie it back to something they care about. And, people think that there's a million things that executives are focused on. Here's the reality. No matter what industry it is, they need market share, profitability, and growth. They need to manage innovation to stay current and to, and to stay viable. They need to be operationally excellent. They need to manage their people. I mean, there's 4 or 5 top corporate objectives that you can bet if you can match your product or service value to one of those, you got a good story.
Yeah. And plus they all have their individual personal wins.
Of course. Yeah. Right.
Because their value as a CIO or an executive at any level is, working on the new stuff, the hot stuff, the modern stuff, not too fast, but certainly not a laggard.
And when I think about looking forward in our industry, and I work in the data field, that somebody that's a chief data officer today or a chief digital officer today, the reality is they're the CEO of the future. And they're setting themselves up from a branding perspective, they're really savvy ones to be taking that path.
Right.
So, when you're doing your research on your prospects, what is their brand? And everybody has a brand, if you LinkedIn, if nothing else, everybody's got something that they want to be known for, and you can get a feel for what their personal wins are going to be.
Right.
Yeah. That's a great point, Brian, because it's one or the other or both, ideally, right? You're either helping them to meet a corporate objective or a personal objective, and the sweet spot is to hit both.
Yeah. And guess which one will win in the end?
Every time.
Right. Because, it's just nature, right? Everyone's looking out for themselves and their company and their role, which is all good. But you got to talk to that because that's what they care about. Reduce risk and increase profile.
And I think that we tend to talk a lot about why they should do something and really lean into, our product is the greatest, whiz bang, whatever. So that's why you should. And the reality is that we're not giving, in most cases, we don't give credence to the fact that there are reasons they shouldn't. So you need to help them to address both on a personal level and on that corporate level. You need to help them address those reasons why they shouldn't. Because if you don't help to build the talk track around that, they'll come up with it themselves, or your competitors will come up with it for them. And that is, I've seen it kill deals even in the last 24 hours, because we didn't think through and address why they possibly shouldn't do what we're bringing to the table.
Yeah, because that hardest part of that sales process was between, oh yeah, we're going to do it, and doing it. Right?
So we've got a verbal yes.
Right. And everybody thinks it's money.
Right.
It's almost never money. You can tell if a company's got the money before you even call on them.
That's such a great point, because we do think it's about the money. A lot of times they just, and I've heard you talk about this before too, they don't know how to get it done.
How to get it done.
And in the million things they have in front of them every day, your thing's not that important.
Right. I mean, think back to when you were in a CIO. How many options a day did you have to spend your time on, and your budget and your resources?
Right. And you have to protect your time. I mean, if you think of your, just like every salesperson has smarter ways to spend or less smarter ways to spend their time, right? That's true for all of your prospects as well. And you got to make sure that you're the one that is bringing them something that is the most valuable thing for them to spend their time on that day, and help them to go through the process, to help them to say, what's next, and who is that next person we need to talk to, and what's the process look like, and help them drive that through, because it's not obvious. And depending on, of course, what your product or service is, they may only do this once every 2 or 3 years or longer, right?
Well, that's it. As reps, we think that they've gone to decision-making school and changed the company school and how to spend the company's money school. Those are all unnatural acts within a company.
I absolutely think that's true.
Right?
Yeah. in my own experience, I had a situation where I needed to buy a system, and it was a multi-million dollar investment. And of course, you've got every vendor in that space is coming at you, and you've got partners that implementation or deployment partners that all have their preferred, and they're all bringing their ideas to the table. And how do you weed through all of that?
Yeah.
In this process, I had one gentleman whose product I thought had, was a viable option. He came into my office completely unprepared. I will tell you that he got 7 minutes with me.
Yeah.
He got 7 minutes with me because he was completely unprepared. He sat down and started that. So tell me what's important to you. Nothing. No, hadn't done any research, hadn't done any background on what, on even the basics of what it was we were trying to achieve, which was very public information. So
Right.
You don't want to be that salesperson. You don't want to be the one that has got this massive multi-million-dollar opportunity with a product that's a viable option, and the CIO kicks you out in 7 minutes. You don't want that to be you.
And that's it, because the customer, and certainly in that situation, you didn't view them all as equal, but you probably viewed 80% of them as capable.
Yes, I think that's very fair.
Yeah.
I think that's very fair. And, unfortunately for that particular company, he was the lone representative. So that experience that he was bringing into my office, the bigger picture for me is I can't have that represent me.
Right.
I mean, when you really get down to it and you're an executive making that level of decision, you got to be really careful about the partners that you choose and the impact that is going to have on your professional brand.
Right. And again, it's not just the money, it's the political impact to you being able to serve the company.
Exactly. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but the typical tenure for a CIO, for example, is 4 years.
Yeah.
4 years, and that number's declining, by the way. And that period of time is in two humps. The first one, 18 months. So if a CIO comes into their job and they're not effective in the first 18 months, they're out the door. If they make it past that, the next really big out the door is 7 years. So there's huge turnover, and that statistic actually applies pretty closely to other executives in the C-suite as well. So you have to understand the risk that they're facing. Look at the turnover. I had one client that went through 3 CIOs in 2 years. 3 CIOs in 2 years. So what do you think the risk factor is for somebody who has relocated their family for a new role, and they already lost 2 of their predecessors in record time? That person is going to be very wary of who they choose to partner with.
Now, how do you approach, say, a new client in your current role? What's your strategy? What's your process? What have you found to be the most effective approach?
Well, I'm a huge believer in research, and that's on several fronts. I mean, obviously, there's the publicly available information on the company, all of the kind of blocking and tackling things that I think salespeople are all largely competent doing. Then it's also really important to dig into your network. Who do you know? Who do they know? What kind of, what background story is there? To make sure that you're going to be coming at a conversation in an impactful way. So to give you an example, if I want to open the door with a new executive relationship, if I, when recently going through deep background on somebody and making my best estimate of what their professional path is, and you through their LinkedIn profile, which is, it's a tool unmatched, right? We didn't always have this. So you can literally see what their career progression has been. And some of them are very obvious about where they want to go next. So you don't want to walk into somebody's office that has aspirations to move from their current role into some future CEO role and talk to them about operational excellence. They don't care,
Yeah.
right? Their brand is all about creating the next really big impact. And they're they need to be shiny. That executive is looking to be shiny. But if you are doing that kind of background and you come across somebody who's always been an operational excellence and that's their thing, and they probably were brought into that organization because that is what they do exceptionally well, then you better have a really strong operational excellence story when you come in there. So I always bring a specific idea around what my hypothesis is about what they're going to care about as a person, as a human to human, what they're going to care about, and make sure that that's through the research that you've got a match there, so that you can bring a really big idea to somebody that wants to make those big splashes, and that you can show an operational excellence, examples and specific ideas around how you would get to that. Totally different conversations.
And how can you tell that from a LinkedIn profile?
I look for things like tenure and roles. What were the titles of their roles? Of course, we can make our titles be whatever we want on LinkedIn, right?
There's no law.
The interesting thing is that some people are rule followers, right? So a lot of my clients, and I'm an engineer as well, so I understand, right? But a lot of them that are in the tech space have some kind of engineering background, and so they tend to be very literal. They'll use their literal titles and exactly what they were held accountable to. And then on the opposite end of that scale, you have people that have learned to use LinkedIn as more of as a personal marketing and branding tool. Yeah. And they take a lot more liberty in the way that they describe themselves. So if you look the education, I think I look for education because it tends to give me personality. Some, right? And these are all generalizations. We don't know this for certain until you meet them, but look for education. What kind of background do they have? Look for tenure in roles. Do their titles look like something that would have been a very literal title, or is it something that they probably that they have obviously altered to really meet more of what their brand ideology is? If you see somebody that is changing jobs and clearly moving up every 2 years, they're on a trajectory and they have a plan, and you can assume that they want to keep moving.
Yeah. And do you have more success, what I used to call climbers? Because I love selling to climbers because they want to make stuff happen.
Me too, but frankly, that's sort of my natural personality too, because I want to get in there and figure out something really cool and fun to do next. So I absolutely have more success with people that you're identifying as climbers, but I never could tell if that was because of them or because that was where I wanted to take them.
Good match. Yeah. How about what is like red flags? I'm sure, because I sold technology forever. You find the portfolio companies where they're all blue, all Oracle, all HP, and it's just going to be an uphill battle because they're going to say, does an IBM have this or Oracle have this?
Right. I like to look for what I call moments of inflection.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for those. You've got a key person in a role that they just brought in somebody from the outside. If they do an acquisition, who is somebody that is a good target in their acquired unit? I'm looking for. I'm not going to be targeting somebody that has clearly been leveraging a competitor's product to their personal success for 10 years. Yeah. Right? That's going to be a really tough. Matter of fact, they probably won't even take the call. So I look for those moments of inflection, and there's lots of tools you can use that notify you when changes are happening at your target accounts and things like that. But and frankly, I use LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a ton. to look for those key position changes, notifications in my network. And of course, I've been doing this for a long time, so I've got a significantly sized network, which is a benefit. So,
Yeah.
you know, if I were, and I often do this for people, and would be happy to do it for any of your listeners, but if you want to connect with me, I'm open to that. Let's connect, and if I can help you to have a little background on somebody through the network that I have, that's okay with me. And I think it's really important that we think of online networking similarly to how we think of if I were to walk into a business networking event and change cards, right? Like,
Right.
I'm
What's
not
the
going to say, no,
difference?
I don't want your card, right? I mean, who does that?
Right, right. You just take mine and buy from me. Yeah. Just help
I
me. Yeah.
never understand when people say, no, I'm not going to connect with you. I'm like, well, that's odd. Okay. So happy to do that. I think those, you know, I watch those connections and the changes that are made, because I think you've got to find an inflection point or a pain point, right? If you see an article come out and there's been some public failure of something in the tech space, for me, that's an inflection point. Your competitors are at risk when they've had a failure, when they've had an oops, we dropped the ball. That's when that's when their risk is heightened. So, you know, it's not easy to go into those accounts that have had competitors embedded for a long time, but it is possible.
And that's it. I think too many reps look at every account as equal and they just work on their pitch. And it's like, you might find them at the right time and that pitch might resonate, but that's
Right.
needle in the haystack. What you're talking about is really being a detective and reverse engineering how the decision gets made and what they care to talk about.
Well, and the underlying key to it has to be, you have to care about their well-being. You have to care about helping them be successful. And if you don't care and you're just pitching something at them, guess what? They know that.
Right. And you might luck out, but it's no way to live, right? That's no way to sell.
No.
And you're not
And,
going to
and
sell
it
the huge deals that way.
and it feels like you're selling, and it feels like you're being sold to.
Yeah.
And when you really care about helping people to be successful, it feels good to do it, and it feels good on the other side of it too. And you know, for me, I care about people being successful. And frankly, if they're in a situation where I feel like they are set up for strong success doing exactly what they're doing, I'm not going to propose anything different. I'm going to go find a situation where I can really be helpful. And that's my personal approach, because I really truly want to help people. And that's what I feel like great sales organizations do. They help companies and they help individuals to be successful.
Right. And that's because people use the word empathy a lot. And people say that's like thinking like the client. That's part of it. But the caring part is what builds trust. Because if somebody feels that the other person cares enough to tell the truth and walk away,
Yep.
or care less about the money and more about the outcome, they're going to
Exactly.
trust what you say. And trust is the bandwidth of communication. Low trust, they don't believe a word you say. High trust, they want to hear from you.
You know, I feel like that this is to me, it's different than saying I want to be a relationship seller.
Right.
To me, it's different than that, right? This is about genuinely creating human trust because you care about their well-being, right? And trust is table stakes. If you don't have trust, they're not going to buy from you. And frankly, they shouldn't, because their career is at way higher risk than yours is if they make a perceived bad decision. So, you know, I'm not talking about, oh, we're going to get in and we're going to go golfing and we're going to spend months and months of buddy time. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, you know, genuinely bringing valuable items to the table, helping them to be successful in their daily pursuits. And I like to think of it as challenging their mindsets to say, have you thought about doing this? And if we did this would be the outcome on your corporate objectives. This would be the needle that we would move. right? So I I'm leery of people who think about relationship selling and it's going to take me a year and I just need to spend time with them. And today's executives, number one, they don't have time for that. That's sort of an era past.
It is. And I think people kind of think that's what it is. It's going to dinner, golf, outings and stuff. And that's nice. There's nothing wrong with it. But
Oh, it's fantastic if you can
it's
do it.
fun. Yeah. But the real relationship is an exchange of value.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got to have value to give it, either product knowledge, accessibility to technical resources, experience, network to be able to share what
Right.
other people are doing. And that's what executives want.
It is what they want. And frankly, it's what they need. They
Yeah.
need partners to help them to get to that. And that, the relationship element of it is, if I break that down to saying it's trust, and to your point, it's value created trust. You can't get to value created trust with a pitch. You've got to do all of that hard work, the detective work, to use your word, that to know what they need to help them to really be successful. And that's work. You got to get in there and figure it out.
And all I hear is, oh, we're going to work on our messaging. It's like, work on learning ask them what they care about, what they want to hear about, what they're doing. And how can you get them to focus on that problem and how you can help them solve it? Instead of your next 30-second pitch or your value proposition or your elevator pitch.
Absolutely. I love the word that you use, the word focus. Get them to focus on that. There's so many things coming at them every day. Every day there's some, just like every one of us. They're getting all of that same multitude of inputs and things they're supposed to do. And the reality is that something gets done first, right?
And a lot of stuff doesn't. And everything else doesn't.
Everything else doesn't, because, I start out my day with a really solid plan. And by about 2 o'clock, I'm getting worried about my plan for the rest of the day sometimes, right? And this is the same experience that your prospects are having. And getting them to focus is bringing that value to the table. When you bring them something useful and they, oh, okay, you know what? I could use that to go do the next thing. That's when you start to create a giving relationship. You have to create a giving relationship to create value.
And what would you say is the number one thing that you see sales reps doing wrong?
Yeah, I think the pitch part, Brian, I think you nailed it with that. It's not about tweaking your message or your email for the 50th time. It's about investing your time in learning learning and creating a hypothesis around how you can help them. You may not be exactly right, but you're going to get close enough to get a door open, to have a conversation, because a lot of the people that you're competing against are pitching.
Everyone is. Yeah.
Right. And that's the good news, because if you're willing to put in the work, the good news is you're differentiated.
Yep. Cool. Hey, this has been a fun conversation. Where can people go to connect with you and follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Obviously, I've mentioned it several times. Please connect with me. It's Palmer Lisa C. Also on Twitter, same at Palmer Lisa C. It's been a pleasure, Brian.